Planning to own a med spa? You might want to think twice. Not because you shouldn't do it, it's because there's a real gap between what this looks like from the outside and what it actually costs. And that gap is exactly what this video is for. The pitch is one of the most lucrative sounding on this entire channel. Premium, self-pay clients, real markup on Botox and fillers, and industry estimates showing average owner income between $300,000 and $375,000 a year. Here's the number almost nobody explains clearly. For a lot of owners, a huge chunk of that $300,000 isn't business profit at all. It's their own salary, paid to themselves, for personally doing the injections. Stop doing the treatments yourself, hand the needle to a hired provider instead, and that same practice, same revenue, same clients can suddenly produce meaningfully less real profit. The business has to pay someone market rate to replace the work you used to do for free. So how much of that headline income figure is actually the business, and how much of it is just you, working a very well-paid job inside your own building? That's what we're figuring out today. One quick note before the numbers start. Every figure in this video is well-researched and checked against multiple sources, but research can still contain honest mistakes, and costs and regulations shift by state, city, and sometimes zip code. Treat these as your benchmark, not a quote for your specific situation. This video is for educational purposes only and is not legal, tax, financial, or business advice. Always do your own research and due diligence before making any business decision. A second note, specific to this episode. Medical spa ownership and supervision rules vary significantly by state and involve real legal complexity around who can own and operate one. This isn't legal or medical advice. Consult a healthcare attorney in your state before making any decision based on this video. The first cost, the one with a genuinely enormous range depending on how med spa you actually go, a room with an injector and a full medical clinic are very different investments. A lean, injectables-first practice, a clinician subleasing a single room, can realistically open for $75,000 to $150,000. A real standalone clinic, 2 to 4 treatment rooms, proper build-out, 1 or more energy-based devices, and real opening inventory commonly runs $192,000 to $775,000, with industry estimates varying this widely because people are describing very different businesses under the same label. Monthly operating expenses alone, once you're open, typically run $30,000 to over $70,000, covering rent, staff, medical-grade product, and equipment. Medical-grade build-out specifically tends to run 15 to 25% over whatever the initial contractor estimate says, driven by plumbing for procedure sinks, dedicated electrical for laser equipment, and medical-grade HVAC that a standard commercial build-out was never designed around. In most states, unless you're a licensed physician yourself, the practice also needs a medical director attached to it, adding another real cost and another real relationship to manage on top of everything else. Don't skip HIPAA either. A compliant program, covering security risk assessment, vendor agreements, and staff training, realistically runs $3,000 to $10,000 just to set up properly, with real ongoing maintenance after that. The hidden trap, the one buried inside your own paycheck. Profit that disappears the moment you stop personally treating clients was never really profit. It was your own labor, wearing a business's clothes. Here's the distinction that changes how this entire business should be evaluated. Owner-provider practices, where you're the one doing treatments, and manager-run practices, where you hire providers and step back, can show wildly different real profitability at identical revenue. In a manager-run model, the business has to pay a real market-rate salary to replace the clinical work you used to do yourself. That's a genuine cost, not an accounting formality, and it comes directly out of what looked like profit when you were the one holding the needle. This matters enormously the moment you think about selling. A buyer pays for transferable earnings, income the business generates regardless of who's running it. A buyer does not pay full price for profit that vanishes the day the founder stops personally injecting clients. Sophisticated owners keep their own clinical salary completely separate from business distributions, specifically so this distinction stays visible. Blend the two together, and you can convince yourself the business is far more profitable than it actually is. One more number belongs in this conversation. Medical and health services managers carry a median annual wage of roughly $118,000 nationally. A location that needs a real, full-time manager should budget for that role as a genuine cost, not quietly treat the owner's own unpaid time as if it were free forever. The real engine, the one that turns a good injector's income into an actual sellable business, building value that survives without you in the room, is the entire game. So if personal labor was quietly inflating the profit number, where does real, transferable value actually come from? Systems and repeat behavior that don't depend on one specific set of hands. A location that shows strong repeat client behavior, disciplined product cost control, and providers who can deliver consistent results without the founder personally supervising every single treatment is building something a buyer will pay a real multiple for. Product cost discipline matters specifically because injectables carry real, trackable cost per unit. A practice that manages product waste and overordering tightly protects margin in a way that shows up clearly the moment someone reviews the real numbers, not just the impressive top-line revenue. Owners who separate their own clinical paycheck from true business distributions from day one aren't just being tidy with their books. They're building the exact document a future buyer, or their own honest self-assessment, will eventually need to answer one real question. How much of this is the business, and how much of it was always just you? The real money in med spas. The injections were never the business. The business is whatever keeps generating income the day you stop personally doing them. Track that number honestly from the start, and you'll know whether you built a practice or just gave yourself an expensive, very demanding job. Industry data puts real numbers behind the scale of what's possible here, and behind how much of it depends on who's doing the work. A single location med spa can generate roughly $121,632 a month in revenue on average, close to $1.46 million a year, with owner income landing in that $300,000 to $375,000 range, and margins exceeding 20%, genuinely strong for a medical-adjacent business. But that average blends owner-providers, personally injecting every day, with manager-run locations paying full market rate for that same clinical work. The two versions can carry identical revenue and meaningfully different real owner economics, precisely because of who's in the treatment room. That's the whole lesson sitting inside one average statistic. A strong-sounding number can describe two very different businesses, and only one of them is worth a real multiple to somebody else. So let's run the two real outcomes. The optimistic case. You separate clinical salary from true business distributions from the very first month, invest in providers and systems that don't depend entirely on your own hands, and track product cost with real discipline. Revenue tracks toward that $121,000 monthly average or better, and the business itself becomes a genuinely transferable asset, valuable to a buyer specifically because it doesn't disappear the moment you stop injecting. The realistic case. You personally handle the vast majority of treatments, blend your own labor and true profit into one number without separating them, and never seriously plan for what the practice looks like without you physically in the room. The business generates real income for as long as you're personally willing to keep injecting, full-time, indefinitely. The moment you want to step back, hire it out, or eventually sell, the real transferable value turns out to be a fraction of what the headline number implied the whole time. Same treatments, same clients, same building. The entire gap between those two outcomes comes down to whether the business was ever built to survive without the person who started it standing in the treatment room. So is it worth it? If you're picturing that $300,000 average as pure business profit, a meaningful share of it, for a lot of owners, is really just a well-paid job you gave yourself. What's true is that this remains a genuinely lucrative business with real demand and real margins, for owners willing to build something that generates income independent of their own two hands. For someone willing to separate clinical salary from distributions honestly and invest in providers and systems from the start, this can become a real, transferable business worth a genuine multiple. For someone planning to be the injector forever and call the whole number profit, that's not a business you've built. It's a job you've given yourself, with better margins than most. Last reminder, medical spa ownership structures and supervision requirements vary by state and carry real legal complexity. This is not legal or medical advice. Consult a healthcare attorney in your state before making any decision based on this video. Remember this: the needle was never the asset. What the business does the day you put it down is build for that day from the beginning, and the number on your tax return finally means what you thought it meant.